It was a crisp autumn morning in Washington, D.C. The White House bustled with the usual controlled chaos as staffers prepared for the day's meetings and briefings. President Donald Trump, freshly re-elected for a historic second term, sat in the Oval Office, his gaze fixed on the freshly fallen leaves swirling outside the window. He had just wrapped up a meeting with his top advisors when his personal secretary, Jane, entered the room. "Mr. President," she said, her tone carrying a hint of intrigue, "we've received a formal letter from the Vatican. It's marked urgent and personally addressed to you." Trump's eyes sparked with curiosity. He took the heavy, cream-colored envelope from her hand, noting the Vatican's golden seal embossed on the flap. He carefully opened it, pulling out the finely crafted parchment. The letter was written in impeccable English, with the Vatican's crest elegantly stamped at the top. "Dear President Trump, in light of the recent transition of papal leadership, His Holiness Pope Robert Prevost, now known as Pope Leo XIV, extends his greetings and blessings to you. He wishes to invite you for a private audience at the Apostolic Palace in Vatican City to discuss matters of great importance. His Holiness believes this meeting may serve as a pivotal moment in fostering global peace and mutual understanding. With warm regards and prayers, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Secretary of State, Vatican City." Trump leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. The world was still reeling from the sudden passing of Pope Francis just a few weeks ago, an event that had captured global attention. In a surprising turn, Robert Prevost, the American-born cardinal and longtime advocate for reform within the church, had ascended to the papacy as Leo XIV. His election had sparked a wave of speculation about the direction the Catholic Church would take under his leadership. Trump smirked, his fingers tapping the smooth mahogany surface of his desk. An invitation from the Vatican wasn't just a gesture of diplomacy, it was an opportunity to shape the narrative, to present himself as a global peacemaker in a time of unprecedented political and social unrest. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Get me Mike on the line," he said, referring to his vice president, Mike Pompeo, a staunch Catholic with deep connections to the global Christian community. Moments later, Pompeo's voice crackled through the speaker. "Yes, Mr. President? Mike, I've just received an invitation from the new Pope. Wants to meet in private at the Vatican. I think it's time we make a move on this. It could be a powerful moment, something that shakes the world." Pompeo paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "That's a significant opportunity, sir. Prevost is known for his conservative but reformist views. This meeting could set the tone for U.S. Vatican relations for decades." Trump's eyes narrowed, his mind already envisioning the headlines. "Then let's make it happen. I want this meeting arranged as soon as possible." With that, Trump leaned back, his trademark confidence returning. He could already imagine the grand halls of the Vatican, the world's cameras fixed on him as he met with the freshly minted Pope Leo XIV. As he stared at the fading morning light through the Oval Office window, he couldn't help but wonder, what exactly did the new Pope want to discuss? What secrets lay within the hallowed walls of the Vatican, and why had they chosen this moment, just weeks into his second term, to reach out? Trump's pulse quickened. He would soon find out. The Air Force One touched down at Rome's Leonardo da Vinci Fiumicino Airport under the cover of a spectacular Roman sunrise. The sky was a soft blend of pink and gold, casting a warm glow over the ancient city. As the wheels screeched against the tarmac, President Trump leaned back in his leather seat, adjusting his red tie with a sense of anticipation. He had spent the flight reviewing his talking points, consulting with his closest advisors, and even brushing up on his knowledge of Catholic traditions. Despite his public bravado, Trump understood the gravity of this meeting. This wasn't just another political handshake for the cameras, it was an audience with the leader of over 1 billion faithful around the world. As he descended the steps of Air Force One, the crisp Roman air filled his lungs. The airport was alive with the echo of marching feet as the Italian honor guard snapped to attention, their ceremonial swords flashing in the morning light. Waiting for him at the foot of the stairs was Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State, flanked by a delegation of high-ranking church officials. "Mr. President," Parolin greeted, his voice deep and resonant, his face breaking into a warm but formal smile. "Welcome to Rome. His Holiness is looking forward to your meeting." Trump offered a firm handshake, his eyes sharp as ever. "Thank you, Cardinal. It's an honor to be here." The convoy that whisked Trump through the winding streets of Rome was flanked by a mix of Secret Service agents and Swiss guards in their iconic, brightly colored uniforms. Trump watched the city unfold before him through the armored glass. ancient ruins, bustling piazzas, and towering cathedrals. He couldn't help but marvel at the sheer history that surrounded him. As the motorcade approached the Vatican, the massive walls of the smallest country in the world loomed into view. Swiss guards in polished breastplates and plumed helmets lined the grand entrance, their halberds gleaming in the sunlight. The gates of the Apostolic Palace creaked open, and Trump's convoy rumbled through the ancient archway, coming to a stop in the vast courtyard. The air inside the Vatican felt different, thicker, almost sacred, as if the very stones carried the weight of centuries of prayer and power. Trump stepped out, his polished shoes clicking against the ancient cobblestones, his mind racing with the possibilities of the meeting to come. Inside, the walls of the Apostolic Palace were adorned with masterpieces by Renaissance legends. Raphael's vivid frescoes, Michelangelo's towering sculptures, and tapestries that seemed to breathe with life. Trump, usually unimpressed by mere aesthetics, found himself momentarily awed by the splendor around him. As he reached the papal library, two massive wooden doors, each carved with intricate depictions of saints and martyrs, swung open. Standing in the center of the vast, sunlit room, flanked by a pair of Swiss guards, was the new Pope Robert Prevost, now known as Leo XIV. The Pope, dressed in his pure white cassock and traditional white zacchetto, cut a striking figure. He was tall, his face marked by years of contemplation but his eyes sharp, reflecting a keen intellect. His hands, clasped before him, bore the iconic fisherman's ring, a symbol of his supreme authority over the Catholic Church. Trump stepped forward, extending his hand. The Pope's grip was firm, his smile warm yet measured. "Your Holiness," Trump said, his voice carrying a rare note of respect, "thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to meet you." "Mr. President," Pope Leo XIV replied, his voice surprisingly deep with a hint of his Midwestern roots, "welcome to the Vatican. I believe we have much to discuss." As the heavy doors closed behind them, sealing the two powerful leaders in the quiet of the ancient library, Trump felt the full weight of the moment. He had faced dictators, kings, and generals, but this felt different. This felt historic. They took their seats across a polished, centuries-old oak table. Between them lay not just physical space, but a vast gulf of ideologies, experiences, and worldviews. Yet Trump sensed a common thread, a desire to shape the course of history. As Pope Leo XIV leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Trump's, the conversation began. It would be one that would shake the foundations of both the political and spiritual worlds. The papal library was silent, the air thick with the faint scent of ancient parchment and polished wood. Trump sat across from Pope Leo XIV, the new leader of the Catholic Church, whose intense gaze revealed a mind sharp with purpose. "Mr. President," the Pope began, his deep voice echoing slightly in the high-ceilinged room, "I asked you here not just as a political leader, but as a man who understands the power of narrative, influence, and legacy." Trump leaned in, intrigued. He had expected a polite conversation about peace, charity, and mutual respect. Instead, the Pope's words hinted at something deeper, something strategic. "I'm listening," Trump replied, his tone cautious but engaged. The Pope smiled, sensing the businessman in Trump awakening. In recent years, the Church has faced unprecedented challenges, internal divisions, declining faith in the West, and a rapidly changing global landscape. "I believe we are at a crossroads, and our actions today will define the Church's future for centuries to come." Trump's eyes narrowed, his mind racing through the potential political implications. He had always understood power as a game of influence, alliances, and carefully controlled narratives. If the Pope was reaching out to him, it meant the Vatican saw an opportunity or perhaps a threat on the horizon. Pope Leo XIV continued, "You and I, Mr. President, are in unique positions. You have reshaped American politics, challenged the status quo, and defied conventional wisdom. I seek to do the same within the Church. But to do that, I need allies." Trump smirked, leaning back in his chair. He respected the direct approach. "Go on," he said, folding his arms across his chest. The Pope's eyes twinkled with a mix of resolve and calculation. "I propose a partnership. Not a formal alliance, of course, but a mutual understanding, a shared narrative. We can stand together on issues of faith, family, and freedom. Together, we can push back against the tide of moral relativism, the erosion of traditional values, and the growing influence of secular ideologies." Trump's mind flicked to his base, the millions of conservative Americans who looked to him as a defender of Christian values. An alignment with the Vatican could strengthen his standing among these voters. solidifying his legacy as a champion of religious freedom. But Trump was also a pragmatist. "And what do you get out of this?" he asked, his blue eyes sharp, challenging. The Pope leaned forward, his fingers interlacing. "In exchange, the Church gains a powerful ally on the world stage. Someone who can help us shape public opinion, rally support for our causes, and perhaps even influence the political landscape in key regions." Trump nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. This wasn't just about faith, it was about power. The Pope sought to realign the moral compass of the Western world, and he wanted Trump's media machine, his unmatched ability to command global attention, to help make it happen. There was a long pause as the two men studied each other, each silently weighing the risks and rewards. Finally, Trump broke the silence. "You're talking about a new crusade," he said, his voice carrying a hint of both admiration and wariness. Pope Leo XIV smiled, his eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight around them. "Not a crusade, Mr. President. A reawakening." Trump leaned back, his mind already spinning with the potential headlines, the speeches he would give, the rallies he would hold. He saw the path to not just political power, but historical immortality. But the Pope wasn't finished. He reached into the folds of his white cassock and produced a small, leather-bound book, its cover embossed with a symbol Trump didn't immediately recognize, a cross entwined with a single, piercing eye. "This," the Pope said, sliding the book across the polished table, "contains the words of a forgotten prophecy. One that speaks of a leader who will rise from the West, a man who will unite nations and restore faith in a time of great darkness." Trump hesitated for a moment before picking up the book, feeling the cool, worn leather in his hands. He opened it, his eyes scanning the cryptic Latin text. "I want you to read this, Mr. President," the Pope continued, his voice low and firm. "Consider it a guide, a map for the path I believe we are both destined to walk." Trump closed the book, his mind now fully committed to the unfolding intrigue. He had come to the Vatican expecting a polite, symbolic exchange. Instead, he had found a powerful ally in the most unexpected of places. As he rose to leave, Pope Leo XIV extended his hand once more. "May God guide your steps, Mr. President. The world is watching, and history awaits." Trump shook the Pope's hand, feeling the cool metal of the fisherman's ring against his palm. He turned and strode out of the papal library, the weight of the small leather book pressing against his chest. As the heavy doors of the Apostolic Palace closed behind him, Trump felt a surge of energy, a sense of purpose unlike any he had felt before. He had been given a glimpse into a hidden world of power and prophecy, and he intended to seize it. The following days in Rome were a blur of formal meetings, diplomatic dinners, and a whirlwind of press conferences. Yet, even amidst the frenzy, Trump couldn't shake the conversation with Pope Leo XIV from his mind. That book, its cryptic promise, its ancient origins had burrowed into his thoughts. He had expected a typical political negotiation, but what he had encountered was something far deeper. Pope Leo XIV wasn't just a religious leader, he was a man with a vision, a powerful figure seeking to reshape the world in his image. The prophecy had intrigued Trump. He was no stranger to the idea of destiny, of being a leader chosen for a moment in history. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that the Pope saw something in him, something beyond just political power. Later that evening, in his suite at the luxurious Hotel de Russie, Trump sat by the window overlooking the ancient city. The soft hum of the bustling streets below barely reached his ears. He had spent most of the day discussing trade deals and diplomatic affairs, but his mind kept returning to the book and the conversation in the papal library. What did it mean? Was it just a symbolic gesture? Or did the Pope truly believe in the prophecy? As he sipped his glass of water, Trump's phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from one of his trusted advisors, Stephen Miller. "Mr. President, you need to hear this. The Vatican is more involved in global politics than anyone realizes. There are rumors about their influence in key European elections, and even some whispers of the Church working behind the scenes with global financial powers. Be cautious." Trump's fingers tightened around his glass as he read the message. He had always known that the Vatican held significant sway, but the implications of Miller's words were unsettling. Was the Pope merely seeking an ally, or was he trying to pull Trump into a web of international intrigue? The next day, as Trump prepared to depart the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV requested a private meeting. This time, it would be away from the public eye, a final conversation between two men who now understood that their fates were intertwined. Trump arrived at the Apostolic Palace, and once again, the grandeur of the place took his breath away. The Vatican, a city within a city, had witnessed centuries of power struggles, holy wars, and the rise and fall of kings and empires. Now it seemed it was watching as two powerful men, each with their own ambitions, met to discuss the future of the world. In the secluded chapel within the papal residence, the Pope was waiting. He stood before a small altar, a candle flickering in the soft light, his hands clasped in silent prayer. As Trump entered, the Pope turned, his eyes reflecting the calm and determination that had defined his rise to power. "Mr. President," Pope Leo XIV greeted him, "thank you for coming. There is much more to discuss, beyond politics, beyond policy." Trump nodded, his curiosity piqued. "I'm listening." The Pope's voice lowered, and he spoke in the quiet, measured tone of a man with years of spiritual reflection behind him. "Our meeting was not an accident. It is part of something much larger, something that transcends the moment. I believe we have a unique opportunity, Mr. President, to shift the course of history. You and I together." Trump raised an eyebrow. "How so?" The Pope's gaze was unwavering. "There are forces in the world, global elites, unseen powers, that have been steering the course of human history for centuries. They work behind the scenes, manipulating events, pushing an agenda that undermines the values that both our nations hold dear. I want to stand against them. And I believe you do too." Trump's expression softened, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. He had always been wary of the establishment, the bureaucratic elites who controlled much of the world's political machinery. The idea of aligning himself with the Pope, a man who had the ear of millions, was beginning to take on a new light. "So, what's the plan?" Trump asked, his voice steady. Pope Leo XIV walked over to a small table where a stack of documents lay neatly arranged. He picked up a folder and handed it to Trump. "These documents contain the beginning of what I call the Reawakening Initiative," the Pope explained. "It is a global movement to bring people back to faith, to challenge the rise of secularism, and to push for a moral renaissance. It will be a slow burn at first, but we can create an unstoppable wave. With your influence, Mr. President, and the moral authority of the Vatican, we can change the world." Trump scanned the documents quickly, his eyes gliding over the carefully crafted language, the names of key allies, and the strategies outlined. This wasn't just about religious revival. It was a full-scale geopolitical maneuver designed to pull together political, economic, and religious forces under a single banner. The Pope's vision was grand, sweeping, and revolutionary. "I like it," Trump said, his voice sharp. "You've got my attention, Your Holiness. But let's be clear, this isn't charity. If I'm going to be involved, I want results. I want influence. I want power." The Pope nodded. "And you shall have it, Mr. President. This is a partnership. A new world order, as it were. But one rooted in faith, morality, and truth." Trump paused, considering the offer. It was a dangerous game, but one he had always played. Aligning with the Vatican, with its vast network of influence, could bring him closer to his ultimate goal, a legacy that stretched beyond his time in office. But what was the price? What was Leo XIV truly after? As the meeting ended, the two men shook hands once again, the weight of their shared secret heavy in the room. Outside, the sounds of the Vatican's bustling courtyard seemed a world away, and inside, an unspoken agreement had been made. Trump had entered the Vatican as a visitor, but he was leaving as an ally and a player in a much larger game than he had anticipated. The days following the private meeting with Pope Leo XIV left Trump with a growing sense of both excitement and trepidation. The Reawakening Initiative was more than a strategic partnership, it was a calling. As the President of the United States, he was no stranger to moments of great responsibility and far-reaching decisions, but this felt different. It was as if the stage was set for something monumental, a moment in history where his actions could alter the course of the future. Back in Washington, D.C., Trump began to quietly move his pieces into place. His inner circle was loyal, but none were aware of the full scope of his Vatican meeting. The plan had to be executed carefully, with precision. There would be no room for mistakes. Trump knew that the stakes were higher than ever, but he also knew that aligning with Pope Leo XIV, now regarded as a new beacon of hope in the religious world, was the chance of a lifetime. Over the next few weeks, the groundwork for the Reawakening Initiative began to take shape. The Vatican, under Pope Leo XIV's leadership, intensified its efforts to regain influence over Europe, Latin America, and parts of Asia, while Trump quietly strengthened alliances with powerful religious leaders back in the U.S. He knew the true power of this partnership lay not in public speeches but in subtle influence. He needed to build support without alerting his political enemies to the alliance. At the heart of the plan was a global movement, one that aimed to restore traditional values in society. It wasn't just about religion, it was about challenging the dominance of secular elites, questioning the rise of globalization, and giving people a sense of purpose and community that many felt was lost. Trump began to speak more about faith, family, and the importance of national sovereignty. His rallies became a platform for both political and spiritual renewal. Meanwhile, Pope Leo XIV worked behind the scenes to mobilize his vast network of influence. His leadership style, a mix of humility and sharp strategic thinking, won him the admiration of both the faithful and the politically powerful. He made several key visits to European capitals, meeting with heads of state and discussing the importance of moral clarity in governance. His ability to influence without forcing his will was a rare trait among world leaders, but it was what made his mission so powerful. The world began to take notice. In Europe, particularly in Italy, Spain, and Poland, the message of the Reawakening Initiative gained traction. Political leaders who had long struggled with their image as secular figures now found themselves engaging in deeper conversations about the role of religion in society. At the same time, populist movements across the globe began to adopt rhetoric that echoed the Pope's call for a return to traditional values. What began as an alliance between Trump and Leo XIV had evolved into something much larger, a global force that could not be ignored. But as the movement gained momentum, so did the opposition. In Washington, critics of Trump were quick to pounce. The very idea of the president aligning so closely with a religious figure, especially one as powerful as the Pope, was met with suspicion. Was this the rise of a theocratic agenda? Were the lines between church and state being blurred beyond recognition? The media, always hungry for controversy, latched onto the connection between the two men. Headlines screamed of a holy alliance, and pundits speculated on the true motivations behind the partnership. Some saw it as a positive move, a return to values that had been forsaken in modern society. Others, however, saw it as the beginning of a dangerous political marriage between the church and the state. But Trump was undeterred. He had always thrived on controversy, on being the center of attention, whether it was for his policies, his business dealings, or his larger-than-life personality. He knew that the more attention they garnered, the more influence they would have. And the Pope, with his quiet charisma and unparalleled moral authority, had already begun to shift the global narrative. One evening, after another fiery rally in Ohio, Trump sat down with his most trusted advisors. They had been working tirelessly to refine the messaging around the Reawakening Initiative. They had cultivated alliances with Christian groups, faith-based organizations, and conservative pundits, all of whom had been receptive to the idea of a moral renaissance. "We're winning," Trump said, a confident smile spreading across his face. "The more they try to tear us down, the stronger we get. Leo's vision is resonating, and people are hungry for something real, something they can believe in." But despite his outward confidence, Trump was fully aware of the complexities of the situation. The Vatican's involvement in global politics was not a new thing, but with Pope Leo XIV at the helm, it was clear that the Church had become a far more active player in the geopolitical game. There were whispers of behind-the-scenes maneuvering, financial dealings, and new alliances forming in the shadows of power. One of the most significant moves in the Vatican's strategy was to consolidate influence in Latin America. Pope Leo XIV had been particularly focused on the region where Catholicism still held sway but was being challenged by rising secularism and evangelical movements. The Pope's subtle approach to diplomacy, combined with Trump's support for traditional Christian values, gave them a unique advantage in countering these secular and Protestant forces. As the movement continued to expand, however, there was a growing concern. Trump's team had started receiving anonymous messages warning them of the Vatican's hidden agenda. Some suggested that the Pope's vision for a reawakened world order was not just about spiritual revival, it was about power, both political and economic. Trump knew better than to ignore such warnings. On a chilly evening in late autumn, Trump sat down with Pope Leo XIV once again. This time, the conversation was less about grand vision and more about practical matters. "The winds are shifting," the Pope said, his tone far more serious than before. "There are forces that wish to undermine what we are building. You must be careful, Mr. President. There are those who believe in the cause we've set in motion, but there are also those who will seek to control it for their own ends." Trump listened intently, his gaze steady. "I'm not worried about the critics. I faced worse. But you're right, there's always a danger when you challenge the establishment. Who's behind this? The Pope's eyes darken. There are factions within the Vatican itself, Mr. President. Some of my own cardinals who have other ideas. And then there are the global elites, those who profit from the status quo. They won't let us succeed without a fight. Trump stood up, his silhouette framed by the large windows overlooking the Vatican gardens. He knew that the battle for power had only just begun. What had started as a simple conversation between two men had evolved into a global movement, and with it, a web of secrets, lies, and power struggles. But Trump was never one to back down from a fight. And if there was one thing he knew, it was how to win. Together with Pope Leo XIV, he would stand against the forces that sought to control the world from the shadows. The Reawakening Initiative had become more than just a movement, it had become a revolution. And no matter the cost, they would see it through to the end.